Okay, hold on. Mother Nature. Leaves here that weren't here yesterday. All have nurturing and mothering instincts. Okay. So I just want to check in with you. Good morning. Does everybody here have a mother? Raise your hand. There's not some hands raised. I mean, yeah. It's an interesting thing if you think about motherhood and this day in the celebration of mothers. It's something that every human being around the world shares. We all came from a mother. Now, if all those mothers got together, imagine what the world could be. So today, the title of my talk is No Joy in Mudville. The topic for this month is joy, but of course I will talk about mothers as well. So I want to honor all of the mothers here and all the mothers not here today. I just want to share some factoids about mothers. Elephants. I mean, moms, you think you had it tough. Elephants are pregnant for 22 months. 22 months, and they give birth to a baby that's over 200 pounds, and the baby's born blind, which is why you see the little baby elephants holding onto their mother's tail. The orangutan builds a new nest every single night. And on top of that, they don't put their babies down for 7 years. So every night she's got to build a new house with the baby hanging on to her. So briefly, as a reminder, the concept of Mother God. The concept of Mother God. The concept of Mother God, the divine feminine, existed for 35,000 years in our culture, the last 5,000 years being the patriarchal idea of God. So, here in New Thought, one of the things that we are blessed to enjoy as part of our teaching is the celebration of this divine feminine. And I also want to honor today the mother of New Thought, who is Emma Curtis Hopkins. Emma Curtis Hopkins was known as the teacher of teachers. She trained over 50,000 students, and among those students were Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, the founders of Unity, Melinda Kramer, the founder of Divine Science, Emily Cady, the author of Lessons in Truth, the textbook of Unity, and also her last private student was Ernest Holmes. So it's interesting, if you look at the history of the New Thought movement and its teachings, its foundations are so deeply tied to women. Women and the divine feminine gave birth to these ideas of the creative mind, of the creative heart, of all that we are and all that we can be in and through the power of spirit. So in honor of Emma, I want to share a reading from something called Self-Treatment that Emma Curtis Hopkins wrote. Born of God, born of God, born of God. My thoughts are born of God. My words are born of God. My actions are born of God. This is truth. It is a touch of my will-o'-the-wisp, thoughts on reality to say they are born of God. God is here. I touch my face against God, and its beauty is the beauty of God. I lay my gold on God's here substance, and my Christ's innate ability. God is here. Behind me is God. I lay all that I have there and say unto it, born of God. God is before me. I put down all that I have there and say unto it, born of God. On my right I stretch my hand and lay it upon God, and lo, my hand is born of God. It works whatsoever is good. On my left hand there is a resting place. Under me is the eternal God. My feet touching God go not astray. I remember where I am, born of God. I am all God. Beautiful, beautiful. I mean, we are all born of God. We are all part of this divine thing. And in our teaching, we have so many interesting things that become a part of what it is that we study. But at our core, we don't ever want to forget the fundamentals. The fundamentals of the creative process and that thought creates, and how does that work? It works through the realization of what God is, this creative and powerful force, and who we are in that process. And I always like to think of mothers on this day, of course. My mother hasn't been around for many years, and I'm not going to talk about my mom too much today. Last time, I think I talked about my mother was in the other building, and I had orange balloons that were sort of following me around. But I'm going to tell you a story about my grandmother, because I love my grandmother. My grandmother, for those of you who have not heard, was a little Italian woman, and she was a devout Catholic, very faithful. I always have shared in my commercial for prayer chaplain training, which is coming up, is she was one of the best prayers, one of the best practitioners of prayer that I know. She said many rosaries and rocked in a rocking chair and went into that sort of fugue where she was, fog, where she was so greatly connected to the God of her understanding. But in my household, there was also a lot of drama, especially around the holidays. And we like to play cards in my family at Christmas time. And at Christmas time, the card games often got competitive. They'd get competitive and they'd get a little heated at times, you know. And so it wasn't atypical for there to be some small disagreement during that card game. And one year, we would all sort of host all the children of my grandmother in different houses, my mother and her sisters. So we always had huge Christmas Eve events with people that I didn't know. You know, one year there'd be a boyfriend there from one of my cousins, and next year there wouldn't be, and consistently a couple of my aunts would be off in a corner, drunk. But this one year, it happened to be at our home, and I don't know what happened. All I heard was cards slamming down and people jumping up from their chairs and exiting out the door. And somehow, my mother got involved in the discussion and maybe took a side, I don't remember. But at any rate, my grandmother took the other side of the argument. And she decided to leave, and she gets to the door of our house, and this little 5'4" woman whips around with her horn-rimmed glasses and says, "In the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, I will never enter this house again." And she turns heel and out she goes. And my mother looks at me and we just bust out laughing. The best part was the next morning at breakfast, my grandmother was staying 2 blocks away with my uncle. I hear the back door open and close. My grandmother comes in and sits down, has some coffee, and says, "Good morning." And my mother says, "Good morning," and all was well. Born of God, born of God. All that is behind me, all that is before me, all that is here right now is born of God. So whatever it is that's happened in our lives, whatever it is that's going on right now, whatever it is we're looking to in the future, we turn our eye to this God thing that we are, this God thing that we're born of, and we bless it, and we're born of God. We are this thing. We're created as this thing. And we bring this joy to whatever it is that we do, or we don't. Now, I wanted to share, how many people know why it's called No Joy in Mudville? Anybody? Couple? Baseball? Casey at bat. Yeah. It's actually Casey at the bat, incidentally, but it's Casey at bat. And I wanted to just tell you, that reading I read by Emma Curtis Hopkins was written in 1888. This poem was written in 1888. My new house was built in 1888. And so what's been on my mind these past few months since we got this house is what happened in 1888. So I just keep finding things that happened in 1888. So this poem was written in 1888 called Casey at the Bat by Ernest Lawrence Thayer. And it's baseball season, and I like baseball, and I want to share it with you because I think it's great. So, Casey at the bat. The outlook wasn't brilliant for the Mudville Nine that day. The score stood 4-2, with but 1 inning more to play. And then when Cooney died at first and Barrows did the same, a sickly silence fell upon the patrons of the game. A straggling few got up to go in deep despair. The rest clung to the hope which springs eternal in the human breast. They thought, if only Casey could get a whack at that, we'd put up even money now with Casey at the bat. But Flynn preceded Casey, as also Jimmy Blake, and the former was a Lulu, and the latter was a cake. So upon that stricken multitude grim melancholy sat, for there seemed but little chance of Casey's getting to the bat. But Flynn let drive a single to the wonderment of all, and Blake, the much despised, tore the cover off the ball. And when the dust had lifted and the men saw what had occurred, there was Jimmy safe at second and Flynn a hugging third. Then from 5,000 throats and more there rose a lusty yell. It rumbled through the valley, it rattled in the dell, it knocked upon the mountain and recoiled upon the flat. For mighty Casey was advancing to the bat. 10,000 eyes were on him as he rubbed his hands with dirt. 5,000 tongues applauded when he wiped them on his shirt. Then while the writhing pitcher ground the ball into his hip, defiance gleamed in Casey's eye, a sneer curled Casey's lip. And now the leather-covered sphere came hurling through the air, and Casey stood a-watching it in haughty grandeur there. Close by the sturdy batsman, the ball unheeded sped. That ain't my style, said Casey. Strike one, the umpire said. From the benches black with people, there went up a muffled roar, like the beating of the storm waves on a stern and distant shore. Kill him, kill the umpire, shouted someone on the stand, and it's likely they'd have killed him had not Casey raised his hand. With a smile of Christian charity, great Casey's visage shone. He stilled the rising tumult. He bade the game go on. He signaled to the pitcher, and once more the spheroid flew. But Casey still ignored it, and the umpire said, strike two. Fraud! Cried the maddened thousands, and echo answered fraud. But one more scornful look from Casey, and the audience was awed. They saw his face grow stern and cold and his muscles strain, and they knew that Casey wouldn't let that ball go by again.
The sneer is gone from Casey's lips. His teeth are clenched in hate. He pounds with cruel violence his bat upon the plate, and now the pitcher holds the ball, and now he lets it go, and now the air is shattered by the force of Casey's blow, or somewhere in this favored land the sun is shining bright. The band is playing somewhere, and somewhere hearts are light, and somewhere men are laughing, and somewhere children shout, but there is no joy in Mudville. Mighty Casey has struck out. Why do I love that poem? So many reasons. I love the fact, first of all, that the setting is called Mudville. We've all been there, haven't we? We've all been in Mudville. And we've all been at bat. And we've all felt the pressure of 10,000 fans looking at us. And we've all felt that confidence, which gave way to overconfidence. And I love the part where it says that Casey, in Christian charity, looked to the crowd to calm down. And then proceeded taking control of this thing, taking control of the game and allowing his human emotions to rise and the anger to rise and the pounding of the bat to happen. I love that as he takes this on and his confidence gives way to ego, he strikes out. But I also love the juxtaposition that somewhere there's still joy happening. That although here in Mudville there's no joy happening, somewhere there's still light shining. Somewhere there's cheers still happening. Somewhere there's light still shining. And so in those places, when we're in Mudville, we have to know that something else is happening somewhere. That even though we're at bat, that we may have struck out, the light is still shining if we choose to see it. So it's interesting, the number 9 in the metaphysical works of Charles Fillmore. He's done a wonderful job of Bible interpretation for those of you that kind of want to look at a particular passage and see how we might interpret it in New Thought. But the number 9 symbolizes completion. So the team, the Mudville 9 innings in a baseball game, 9 months till our mothers gave birth. It signifies an ending, and it signifies a time of beginning, a time of renewal, the end of a cycle, but with the end of every cycle comes the seed of a fresh beginning. Now, one wonderful line by Emma Curtis Hopkins, she said that there is ever a light that streams because of blunders made. I love that. There is ever a light that streams because of blunders made. There is ever a light that streams because you struck out. There is ever a light that carries you forward if you choose. Because of these things we call tragedies, and let's face it, they happen. And despite our best intentions, despite our best prayers, we still encounter them. But I love this concept, this idea that these blunders, these things, these challenges give birth to something new in our lives. And so we choose that when we come across those blunders and those errors and those challenges. We choose that. Now, there is a lost ending to the poem Casey at the Bat. And I'm going to read it to you. And I found it in my computer. Here's the real last paragraph. If truth be told, that day in Mudville, there was pure joy in sight. A single cheering person face full of love and light. That voice screamed praise, those hands clapped loud, those eyes could see no other. A baby boy at bat called Casey, a child, and she his mother. Born of God, born of God, born of God. It is all born of God. We love our mothers. Happy Mother's Day, everybody.